The rifle blast echoed across Copper Falls. Elijah Stone stood in the middle of Main Street, smoke curling from his barrel, every painted widow frozen in terror. He hadn't fired at them. He'd fired at the ground beneath Widow Lucille's feet, the woman who'd just spat on Clara Jennings and called her a worthless pig in front of the whole town. "Next one goes through your corset," Elijah said quietly. He turned to Clara, the heavy woman still kneeling in the mud, still clutching his torn boot she'd been mending, and did something that stopped every heart in the territory. He knelt beside her. What happens when a mountain man with a fortune in gold chooses the town outcast over every beauty fighting for his hand? Stay with me until the end. Drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe now, because what comes next will shake you. 3 days earlier. The storm came down from the peaks like God's own fury. Elijah Stone hadn't spoken to a woman in 7 years. Not since the fever. Not since he dug 2 graves with his own bleeding hands. One large, one so small it broke something inside him that would never heal. He'd sworn never to leave Devil's Ridge again. But the mountain had other plans. His food cache had rotted. The leather straps on his pack mule snapped clean. And the blizzard rolling in from the north carried the kind of cold that killed men in their sleep. So Elijah did what he swore he'd never do. He rode into Copper Falls. The town had changed. New buildings, new faces. Same hungry eyes. Elijah tied his horse outside Miller's General Store and stood there, feeling civilization pressed down on him like a weight. His beard had grown wild. His coat was patched with wolf hide. His left boot had blown its stitching. Freezing slush soaked through to his sock with every step. He looked like a monster. He pushed through the door. The bell jangled. Warmth hit him first. Then the smell, coffee, tobacco, and something that made his chest tight. Perfume. He hadn't smelled perfume since Sarah. The chatter died. Every head turned, every eye fixed on the giant dripping snowmelt onto the floor. Elijah moved toward the counter, his limp visible, his torn boot flapping. "Well, well." A woman stepped into his path. Beautiful the way a blade is beautiful. Sharp features, calculated smile, eyes that weighed everything in gold. Widow Lucille Crane, buried 2 husbands, hunting for a third. "Mr. Stone." She stepped closer, her black velvet dress rustling. 7 years alone on that mountain. You must be desperate for company. Elijah's jaw tightened. "Move." His voice was rust on iron. Lucille's smile flickered. She placed a gloved hand on his chest. "Now, don't be cold. I know what loneliness does to a man. My door is always—" "Rope, nails, whiskey." He spoke past her to the sweating shopkeeper behind the counter. He stepped around Lucille. His torn boot caught on a warped board. He went down hard. His hand slammed into the floor. His knee cracked against wood. Pain shot up his leg. Laughter exploded behind him. "He walks like a crippled mule." Pearl Whitfield, the banker's daughter, pink silk, cruel mouth, didn't bother to whisper. Lucille pressed her lips together, fighting a smile. The other customers looked away, embarrassed or amused. Elijah's knuckles went white against the floorboards. Heat flooded his face. He'd killed men in the war. He'd faced grizzlies alone. But this, the tittering, the mockery, the casual cruelty, cut deeper than any claw. He started to rise, to leave, forget the supplies, get back to the mountain where— "Don't move." A voice, quiet, steady. From the shadows behind the wool blankets, a woman emerged. She was heavy, the heaviest woman Elijah had seen in years. Her dress was gray, shapeless, stained with flour and oil. Her hair was pulled back so tight it stretched her plain face. She didn't look at anyone else. She looked at his boot. "You're bleeding through the leather," she said. "Sit by the stove. Now." She wasn't asking. Elijah stared at her. The pretty women watched, waiting. He could feel their expectation. They wanted him to insult this fat girl, to confirm what Copper Falls believed, that she was nothing. Elijah sat. Clara Jennings knelt beside him. It was hard for her. Her size made the movement graceless, painful. Her knees hit the floor with a thud, but she didn't hesitate. She pulled his muddy, frozen foot into her lap like it belonged there. From her apron, she produced a heavy needle and waxed thread. "Don't look at me," she murmured. "Just breathe." Her hands were warm, large, calloused from years of work. She unlaced what remained of his boot with practiced efficiency, peeling back the ruined leather to reveal the gash beneath. He'd cut his foot on a rock during the fall and hadn't even noticed. Blood seeped through his wool sock. Clara didn't flinch. She pulled a clean rag from her pocket, pressed it against the wound. "Hold this. Pressure." Elijah obeyed. She worked in silence. The needle pierced leather. Waxed thread pulled tight. She wasn't just patching. She was rebuilding, reinforcing the heel with a double stitch that would outlast the boot itself. Behind them, Lucille whispered to Pearl, "Look at her, on her knees for a stranger. Pathetic." "Desperate," Pearl giggled. "Even the mountain man won't want that." Clara's shoulders tensed. Her jaw tightened, but her hands never stopped. Elijah watched her face, watched her swallow the humiliation like bitter medicine, watched her keep working anyway. Something stirred in his chest, something he thought had died with Sarah. Respect. 20 minutes passed. The store stayed silent except for the stove's crackle and Clara's needle. Finally, she bit the thread with her teeth. She set his foot down gently. "Done." She used the counter to pull herself up, breathing hard, face red from exertion. Elijah stood, stamped his foot. Solid. Better than new. He reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. Inside, a gold nugget the size of a robin's egg gleamed in the lantern light. He held it out. Clara's eyes went wide. She stumbled backward. "No!" "Take it." "I didn't do it for pay." Her voice trembled, but iron ran beneath. "I did it because your boot was broken, and it's cold outside. Keep your gold, Mr. Stone." She turned away. "Wait." Clara stopped. She didn't turn around. "What's your name?" "Simons." "Clara," she said finally. "Clara Jennings." Then she disappeared into the stockroom. Elijah stood frozen, the gold heavy in his palm. He looked at Lucille and Pearl. Their eyes were locked on the nugget, hungry, calculating. He put the gold away. He grabbed his supplies. He walked out without another word. News spread through Copper Falls like wildfire. By the next morning, everyone knew. Elijah Stone had gold, mountains of it, and plain Clara Jennings had touched him. At the barber shop, Sheriff Polk roared with laughter. "The hermit and fat Clara! He probably thought she was a bear and felt right at home." The men howled. But at the shack on the edge of town, there was no laughter. The door exploded inward. Virgil Jennings staggered through, reeking of whiskey. He was thin, wiry, with the shaking hands of a drunk and the mean eyes of a man who'd given up on himself decades ago. Clara stood at the stove, stirring watery soup. In the corner, her mother Ruth lay on a narrow cot, a blood-spotted rag pressed to her lips. The consumption had hollowed her out. She weighed less than 90 pounds now, and every breath rattled like dice in a cup. "You turned down gold," Virgil's voice cracked like a whip. Clara's hand tightened on the ladle. "Papa!" "Lucille told me everything." He advanced, boots heavy on the rotting floor. $50. 50. And you said no. "It wasn't right to take it. I just fixed a boot." "You stupid cow." He grabbed her arm. His fingers dug in hard enough to bruise bone. Clara didn't cry out. She'd learned young that crying made it worse. "I owe $40 to the Branson brothers," Virgil hissed, his sour breath hot on her face. "They're coming Friday. 3 days. They'll break my legs, maybe worse. And you're playing proud?" "I'm sorry, Papa." "Sorry don't pay debts." He shoved her against the stove. Her hip hit the iron edge. Pain flared white-hot. Ruth tried to rise from her cot. "Virgil, please." "Shut up." He whirled on his wife. "This is your fault. You raised her soft. Useless." "Leave her alone." Clara stepped between them, shielding her mother. "She's sick." Virgil's eyes narrowed. That calculating look crept across his face, the one he got before doing something terrible. "Lucille says he looked at you. Actually looked." He started pacing, his boots creaking. "Why would a rich man look at you? Unless—" "He was just grateful, that's all." "No." Virgil smiled, yellow teeth glinting. "He's lonely, desperate. Men like that, they get stupid in winter." Clara felt cold dread pooling in her stomach. "What are you saying?" "Tomorrow, you're going up that mountain. You'll bring biscuits. You'll apologize for being rude. And you'll make him want you." "No." The word escaped before she could stop it. Virgil went still. His face darkened like a storm cloud. "What did you say to me?" Clara's heart hammered, but she thought of her mother's rattling breath. She thought of the man in the store who had sat when she told him to, who had looked at her like she was human. "I have my dignity," Clara said quietly. "I won't sell it. Not even for you." Virgil hit her. The backhand caught her across the cheekbone. She crashed into the wall, knocking loose a shelf. Pots and pans clattered down around her. Ruth screamed, or tried to. It came out as a wrenching cough that sprayed blood across her pillow. Virgil ignored his wife. He stood over Clara, breathing hard. "You have what I tell you to have." He grabbed her jaw, forcing her to meet his eyes. 3 days. The Bransons are coming. If I can't pay, they'll take it out on all of us. Your mother, too." He released her with a shove. "Tomorrow, the mountain, or I'll sell your mother's wedding ring, the one you think I don't know about, and let you both starve in the street." He stormed out. The door slammed. Silence. Clara lay on the cold floor, her cheek throbbing, her mother's labored breathing filling the room. She looked at her hands, the hands that could mend anything except her own shattered life. She didn't cry. She was done crying. 3 days. The number burned in Clara's mind as she saddled the borrowed mule. 3 days until the Bransons came. 3 days until her father's legs were broken, or worse. 3 days until they came for her mother's ring, the only thing Clara had left of the woman Ruth used to be. The ride up Devil's Ridge took 4 hours. The air grew thin, the cold grew teeth. Clara's fingers went numb, then her nose, then her lips. Twice she nearly slid off the mule. Twice she caught herself, her thick arms wrapped around the animal's neck. By the time she saw the cabin through the trees, she could barely feel her own body. She was so focused on surviving that she didn't see the rifle. "That's far enough." Elijah Stone materialized from behind a snow-covered pine. He was bigger than she remembered. Or maybe it was just that here, in his domain, he filled the entire world. His rifle was leveled at her chest. "Mr. Stone," Clara's teeth chattered so hard she could barely speak. "I didn't come to cause trouble." "Then why did you come?" She fumbled for the basket in her saddlebag, nearly dropped it. "My father sent me to apologize for refusing your payment." She held out the basket. Her hands shook. She couldn't tell if it was cold, or fear, or shame. Elijah didn't take it. His eyes moved from the basket to her face. Something shifted in his expression. "Who hit you?" Clara's breath caught. "I fell. The ice." "Who hit you?" Quiet. Final. A question that didn't allow lies. Clara swallowed. "It doesn't matter." "Your father." It wasn't a question. Clara said nothing. Elijah lowered the rifle. He looked at the sky, purple bruised, heavy with snow. "Storm coming. Bad one. You smell that?" Clara shook her head. She couldn't smell anything. Her nose had gone numb miles ago. "Ozone," Elijah said. "Means lightning and ice. You won't make it down alive." "I can try." "No." He turned toward the cabin. "Inside, now." Clara hesitated. To enter a bachelor's cabin alone would destroy whatever reputation she had left. The town already called her names. This would make it worse. Then she remembered. What reputation? They called her Fat Clara, Plain Clara, Worthless Clara. What was left to lose? She followed him inside. The cabin stopped her cold. From outside, it looked rough, logs barely distinguishable from the mountain. But inside, warmth, order. Books, books everywhere, stacked on shelves, piled on tables, lined up along the walls. Shakespeare, Plato, geological surveys, poetry, philosophy. More books than Clara had seen in her entire life combined. "You read," she breathed. Elijah was kneeling by the fireplace, feeding logs to the flames. "Nothing else to do up here." He pointed to a chair near the fire. A small chair, child-sized. Clara looked at it, looked at him. Elijah followed her gaze. His jaw tightened. "Sit in the other one," he said roughly. "That one's not for sitting." Clara sat in the larger chair. The heat from the fire seeped into her frozen bones. She watched Elijah move around the cabin, filling a kettle, setting it on the iron hook, pulling down 2 tin cups, then stopping, staring at them for a long moment before putting one back and taking down a different cup. He'd been about to use someone else's cup, someone who wasn't here anymore. "Why did you really come?" he asked, without turning around. Clara looked at her hands. "I told you, my father—" "Your father sent you to trap me into marriage." The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Clara's face burned. "I wasn't going to. I would never." "I know." Elijah turned, leaned against the stone mantel, crossed his arms. "You walked 4 hours through a killing cold to bring me biscuits. You could barely stay on that mule. And the first thing you said was an apology." He shook his head. "A woman trying to trap a man doesn't apologize. She flatters. She manipulates. She lies." His eyes locked onto hers. "You told me the truth even when it humiliated you. Why?" Clara held his gaze. "Because I'm tired," she said simply. "Tired of pretending. Tired of performing. Tired of being something I'm not for people who'll never accept me anyway." She looked at the fire. "And because you were kind to me, in the store, you sat when I asked, you let me work. You didn't laugh. That's a low bar for kindness. It's the only bar I've ever known. Silence. The kettle began to whistle. They talked until the storm buried the world. At first, it was awkward. Long silences, the howling wind filling the gaps. But slowly, something shifted. The cabin walls stopped feeling like a trap and started feeling like a shelter. Elijah asked about her sewing. "My mother taught me," Clara said, cradling the warm cup. "Before the sickness. She was a seamstress in Boston, best in the city. She used to say, 'The inside stitching matters more than the outside. If it's ugly underneath, the whole thing falls apart when it's tested.'" She sounds wise. She was everything. Clara's voice thickened. Now she's dying. Consumption. The doctor says weeks, maybe. A month if we're lucky. "I'm sorry." Clara looked at him. "You mean that?" "I do." "Why?" Elijah was quiet for a long moment. "There was a chair," he said finally, "by the fire in my cabin in Colorado. Small, oak. I made it myself when Sarah told me she was pregnant." Clara went still. "Emma used to sit there every night while I read to her. She loved the Greek myths, especially Persephone, the girl who went to the underworld and came back every spring." His voice was steady, but his hands weren't. "The fever took Sarah first. 3 days later, Emma. I held them both at the end, buried them under the big pine behind our cabin." He looked at the small chair in the corner. "I couldn't leave it behind, couldn't sit in it, can't throw it away." Clara understood then. The books, the isolation, the 7 years of silence. It wasn't misanthropy. It was grief so heavy that the only way to carry it was alone. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be. You didn't cause it." He looked at her. "Your mother, how long does she have?" "Weeks, maybe days, without proper medicine." "What medicine?" "Laudanum for the pain, something called digitalis for her heart. The doctor says there are treatments in Denver that might help, but they cost money." Clara nodded. "Your father's debts. $40 to the Branson brothers. They're coming Friday." Elijah's eyes hardened. "The Bransons. I know them. They don't just break legs." Clara's blood went cold. "What do you mean?" 2 years ago, a miner named Patterson owed them $30. They took his daughter as collateral. She was 14. Clara's cup shattered on the floor. She hadn't realized she'd dropped it. "My mother," she breathed. "If they come and Papa can't pay—" "They won't take your mother. She's too sick to be worth anything to them." Relief flooded Clara's chest. "But you," Elijah continued, "you they'd take." The relief turned to ice. "I have to go." Clara lurched to her feet. "I have to get back. I have to—" "You have to sit down." "You don't understand." "Sit down!" His voice cracked through the cabin like thunder. Clara sat. Elijah stood, paced. His massive frame seemed to fill the entire room. "The Bransons won't touch you or your mother. I'll make sure of it." "How? You can't just—" "I can pay the debt. $40 is nothing to me." Clara shook her head. "I can't accept that. I already refused your gold once." "This isn't charity. This is business." He stopped pacing, turned to face her. "I need someone I can trust, someone to handle my affairs in town. Every time I go down that mountain, vultures circle me. Contracts, investments, partnerships. I can't tell the honest men from the snakes." "I'm not a businesswoman. I'm a seamstress." "You read people. I saw it in the store. You knew exactly what Lucille was doing. You knew what everyone was thinking." He stepped closer. "You're honest. too honest for your own good. And you don't look at me and see a bag of gold." Clara's heart was pounding. "What are you proposing?" "Marriage." The word fell between them like an axe. "You marry me, your mother gets doctors. Real ones. Medicine. A warm house instead of that rotting shack. Your father never touches you again. The Bransons never come near your family. And what do you get? Someone to keep the wolves away. Someone who can go into town without being ambushed. Someone who—" He stopped, struggled with the words. "Someone who mends things instead of breaking them." Clara stood slowly. "You want to marry me, the woman everyone laughs at. I want to marry someone whose stitching holds." His eyes burned into hers. "I've had enough things fall apart." Clara looked at this man, scarred, solitary, carrying grief like a second skin. She thought of her mother dying in that freezing shack. She thought of the Bransons coming Friday. She thought of her father's fists, and the town's laughter, and the years of being invisible. And she thought of Elijah's hands, reaching for a second cup, before remembering there was no one to drink from it. "If I say yes," Clara said slowly, "I need you to understand something." "Name it." "I won't be owned. I won't be a decoration. I won't pretend to be something I'm not just to make you look respectable. I don't want respectable. I want honest." "Then we understand each other." She held out her hand. Elijah looked at it. Large, calloused, strong. He took it. "We understand each other," he agreed. The storm broke at dawn. The sky cleared to a brutal, brilliant blue. Snow on the peaks glittered like crushed diamonds. Elijah saddled his horse, a massive black stallion named Shadow, and lifted Clara onto the saddle in front of him. He wrapped his buffalo coat around her shoulders. "Ready?" Clara looked down at the town below, the rooftops just visible through the trees. "No," she said honestly. "Good. Means you're not stupid." He kicked Shadow into motion. They rode down the mountain together, breath fogging in the icy air, the sun blazing overhead. Copper Falls had no idea what was coming. They reached the town at midday. Main Street was crowded. It was market day, and half the territory had come to trade. Ranchers, miners, merchants, and their wives all packed into the muddy thoroughfare. Elijah didn't slow down. He rode Shadow straight down the center of Main Street, and the crowd parted like water before a ship. People stopped, stared. The hermit of Devil's Ridge, and sitting in front of him, wrapped in his coat, was— "Is that Clara Jennings?" The whisper spread like wildfire. "Plain Clara? Fat Clara? With the mountain man?" Elijah ignored them all. He rode straight to the hitching post outside the courthouse. He dismounted, lifted Clara down with surprising gentleness. "Head up," he murmured. "You don't bow to anyone." Clara straightened her spine. They walked toward the courthouse door. And that's when Lucille Crane stepped into their path. She was dressed for battle, black velvet gown, feathered hat, pearl earrings that caught the sun. Behind her, Pearl Whitfield smirked in pink silk. "Mr. Stone!" Lucille's voice was honey over broken glass. "What a surprise! And you've brought your pet." A ripple of laughter from the crowd. Clara's face burned, but she didn't look away. Elijah's expression didn't change. "Move, Mrs. Crane." "Oh, there's no need to be rude. I'm simply concerned for Miss Jennings." Lucille smiled, all teeth. "A young woman alone with a man overnight. Well, you know how people talk. Her reputation—" "Her reputation is her own business." "But surely—" "I said move." Lucille's smile faltered. She wasn't used to being dismissed. She was used to men falling over themselves to please her. She tried a different tactic. She turned to Clara. "My dear, you must be exhausted. That mountain road is so treacherous. Let me take you home. You can rest, clean yourself up, and we can discuss this misunderstanding like civilized women." Clara looked at Lucille, looked at the fake concern masking genuine malice. And for the first time in her life, she didn't swallow the words. "There's no misunderstanding, Mrs. Crane, and I don't need your help." Lucille's eyes widened. Nobody spoke to her that way. Certainly not plain Clara. "I beg your pardon?" "You heard me." Elijah's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Lucille's composure cracked. Her mask slipped, revealing the viper beneath. "You ungrateful sow." Her voice dropped to a hiss only Clara could hear. "I tried to help you. I tried to warn you. This man is a beast, and when he's done using you, he'll throw you away like the garbage you are." Clara leaned in close. "At least I'm not garbage dressed in velvet." Lucille's face went white, then red. She raised her hand. "Touch her." Elijah's voice was quiet, conversational, terrifying. "Touch her, and I'll forget you're a woman." Lucille's hand froze in midair. The crowd held its breath. Slowly, Lucille lowered her hand, smoothed her skirt, forced a brittle smile. "We'll see," she said sweetly. "We'll see how long this lasts." She turned and swept away, Pearl scurrying behind her. Elijah watched them go. "You made an enemy today," he said. Clara was shaking. Adrenaline, fear, something else. "I've had enemies my whole life. At least this time I earned it." Elijah looked at her. Really looked. "Let's get married," he said. They found Judge Harrison in his chambers, eating a ham sandwich over a stack of legal documents. He nearly choked when he saw them. "Elijah Stone," he coughed, reaching for water. "I didn't expect... that is... marriage? Today. Now. But the banns, the waiting period." Elijah dropped a gold nugget on the desk. It thudded against the wood like a heartbeat. Today. Now. The judge looked at the gold, looked at Clara, looked at Elijah. "I'll need witnesses." "Get them." 20 minutes later, Clara Jennings stood in the judge's chambers, heart pounding, facing a man she'd met 3 days ago. 2 clerks stood as witnesses. Both kept glancing at the door, like they expected someone to burst in and announce this was all a joke. Judge Harrison cleared his throat. "Do you, Elijah James Stone, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Do you, Clara Ruth Jennings, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Clara looked at Elijah. He wasn't handsome. His face was scarred from a war she knew nothing about. His beard was wild. His eyes were the color of storm clouds. But those eyes were looking at her like she mattered. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the Montana Territory, I pronounce you man and wife." Elijah reached into his coat and pulled out a leather cord. Hanging from it was a ring. Heavy hammered gold, set with a rough-cut ruby the size of a thumbnail. "My grandmother's," he said, sliding it onto Clara's finger. It fit perfectly. Clara stared at the gem. It was worth more than her father's life, more than the whole shack she'd grown up in. Tears pricked her eyes. "Done." The judge stamped the paper. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Stone." The door slammed open. Virgil Jennings stood there, panting, wild-eyed. He'd heard the news. Word traveled fast in Copper Falls. He looked at Clara, at the ring, at Elijah. Greed twisted his face into something inhuman. "You can't do this," he stumbled forward. "She's my daughter, my property. You stole her." "She was your property." Elijah stepped between Virgil and Clara, a wall of muscle and menace. "Now she's my wife. Her debts are my debts. Her enemies are my enemies." He reached into his coat. Virgil flinched, expecting a gun. But Elijah pulled out a leather pouch, tossed it at Virgil's chest. It hit with a heavy clink. $200, Elijah said. "That pays for every meal she ate in your house, every debt you owe the Bransons, and the cost of never seeing your face again." Virgil clutched the bag. His eyes darted between the money and his daughter. "Take it," Elijah said, his voice dropping to a growl. "Walk away. Start over somewhere else. But if you ever come within 50 feet of my wife again," he leaned in close, "I'll bury you so deep on that mountain that even God won't find the grave." Virgil's courage shattered. He turned and ran without looking back. Clara watched him go. Her father, the man who'd hit her, used her, sold her every chance he got. She felt nothing. No, that wasn't true. She felt free. They walked out of the courthouse into the afternoon sun. The crowd was still there, bigger now. Word had spread. The mountain man had married Fat Clara. Lucille stood at the front, her face a mask of controlled rage. Pearl stood beside her, mouth hanging open. Clara felt the weight of 100 staring eyes. Elijah took her hand, raised it to his lips, and kissed her knuckles. A murmur rippled through the crowd. That gesture, lips to hand, was reserved for royalty, for great ladies, not for seamstresses. "My wife," Elijah announced, his voice carrying down the street. "Mrs. Clara Stone." He looked at the crowd, at Lucille, at Pearl, at everyone who had ever called Clara worthless. "Treat her with the respect she deserves, or answer to me." He led Clara toward the hotel, the only brick building in town. Behind them, the crowd erupted into whispers. Lucille watched them go, her hands clenched into fists, her mind already spinning schemes. She had wanted that gold. She had wanted that ring. She had wanted that man kneeling at her feet, not the town pigs. This wasn't over. In the hotel lobby, Clara stopped. "Elijah." He turned. "Thank you for everything, for paying my father, for standing up to Lucille, for—" She couldn't find the words. He studied her face, the bruise on her cheek, the exhaustion in her eyes, the quiet strength underneath. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "This town won't let this go. They'll come for us." "I know." "Are you ready?" Clara thought of the years of mockery, the endless cruelty, the weight she'd carried alone. She wasn't alone anymore. "I'm ready." Elijah nodded once. "Good, because the war just started." Outside the hotel, Lucille was already gathering her generals. Banker Whitfield, Sheriff Polk, the Branson brothers. They had 3 days to destroy this marriage. They didn't plan to waste a single one. The hotel suite smelled like lavender and lies. Clara stood in the center of the room, still wearing her mud-stained dress, still wearing the ruby ring that felt heavier than a shackle. The bed was the biggest she'd ever seen. The curtains were velvet. The carpet was so thick her boots disappeared into it. She didn't belong here. "Stop!" Elijah's voice cut through her thoughts. He was standing by the window, watching the street below. Stop what? Stop thinking you don't deserve this. Clara's breath caught. How did you? Your shoulders. They're up around your ears. You're waiting for someone to throw you out. He turned to face her. Nobody's throwing you out. This is yours now. The room, the ring, the name. All of it. Clara looked down at her hands. The ruby caught the lamplight, blazing like a drop of blood. It doesn't feel real. It will. A knock at the door made them both turn. Elijah's hand moved to his hip, to the knife he kept there. Who is it? Mrs. Galloway, sir, the dressmaker. You sent for me? Elijah relaxed. He crossed the room and opened the door. A stern-faced woman in her 50s stood in the hallway, carrying a measuring tape and a look of professional skepticism. Behind her, 2 young assistants struggled under armloads of fabric. Mrs. Galloway's eyes swept over Clara, the mud, the shapeless dress, the plain face, and something flickered across her expression. Not judgment, assessment. So you're the one, she said. Clara's chin lifted. The one what? The one who's got Lucille Crane spitting venom in the street. A ghost of a smile crossed Mrs. Galloway's face. I've been waiting 20 years for someone to put that woman in her place. She stepped into the room, already pulling out her measuring tape. Arms up, Mrs. Stone. Let's see what we're working with. Clara glanced at Elijah. He nodded once and moved toward the door. I have business at the bank. I'll be back in an hour. He paused at the threshold. Mrs. Galloway. Sir? My wife is not a charity case. She's not a project. She's not something to be fixed. His eyes were cold. She's something to be dressed, that's all. Understood? Mrs. Galloway met his gaze without flinching. Understood, Mr. Stone. The door closed behind him. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Mrs. Galloway turned to Clara with an expression that was almost warm. He's terrifying, that one. Yes. Do you love him? The question caught Clara off guard. I barely know him. Good answer. Honest. Mrs. Galloway circled her, measuring tape dancing. Love comes later, if it comes at all. Respect comes first. And that man respects you. I saw it in the street. She stopped in front of Clara, hands on hips. You've been hiding, haven't you? Wearing sacks, keeping your head down, hoping if you made yourself invisible, they'd stop hurting you. Clara's throat tightened. It didn't work. No, it never does. Mrs. Galloway's voice softened. But you're not hiding anymore. You're Mrs. Elijah Stone now, and this town is going to have to look at you. She snapped her fingers at her assistants. The emerald silk and the burgundy wool. We're going to make them choke on their own cruelty. 2 hours later, Clara stood in front of the full-length mirror, and she didn't recognize herself. The dress was emerald green, cut to actually fit her body instead of hiding it. Mrs. Galloway had been right. There was a waist under there, and shoulders that the dressmaker called regal. The color made her skin glow and brought out the hazel in her eyes. She looked not beautiful. She would never be beautiful. But she looked real, solid, present. She looked like someone who mattered. The door opened. Elijah stopped dead. Clara turned, suddenly self-conscious. It's too much. I look ridiculous. I should change. No. He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopped in front of her. His eyes moved over the dress, the hair Mrs. Galloway had unpinned and styled, the woman underneath. You look like yourself, he said quietly, for the first time since I met you. Clara's eyes burned. It's just a dress. No, it's armor. He reached out and adjusted the collar, his rough fingers surprisingly gentle. And you're going to need it. Because we're going to dinner. Clara's stomach dropped. Dinner? Where? The hotel dining room. Every important person in Copper Falls eats there on Tuesday nights. You want me to? I want them to see you. To see us. Together. His jaw tightened. Lucille is already spreading poison. We need to show the town that we're not ashamed, that we're not hiding. Clara thought of the dining room, the staring eyes, the whispers. She thought of running. Then she thought of her mother, dying in that shack, of the Bransons circling like vultures, of Lucille's cruel smile. All right, she said, let's give them something to talk about. The dining room fell silent when they walked in. Every fork froze. Every conversation died. 30 pairs of eyes fixed on the couple in the doorway, the mountain man in his rough wool coat, and the heavy woman in emerald silk with a ruby on her finger. Clara felt the weight of their stares like physical pressure. Her instinct screamed at her to look down, to hunch her shoulders, to make herself small. Elijah's hand found the small of her back. Head up, he murmured. You're not prey. You're the hunter. They walked to their table, the best table, near the window, reserved for the most important guests. The maitre d' pulled out Clara's chair with a nervous bow. Mr. Stone, Mrs. Stone, welcome. Mrs. Stone. Clara had never been Mrs. anything before. The word felt strange in her ears. Strange, but good. They ordered. They ate. And slowly the room came back to life around them. But the whispers never stopped. Clara could hear fragments. Can't believe he actually. Look at the size of her. Must be desperate. What does she have that we don't? Elijah ate his steak like nothing was wrong, like they were the only two people in the room. They're talking about us, Clara said quietly. Let them. It doesn't bother you? Elijah set down his fork, looked at her. When I was in the war, there was a sergeant named Murphy, meanest son of a bitch in the whole regiment. He used to say, "The dogs bark, but the caravan moves on." What does that mean? It means small people make noise because they can't do anything else. The noise doesn't matter. Only the movement matters. He picked up his fork again. We're the caravan, Clara. They're the dogs. Clara stared at him. You're not what I expected, she said. What did you expect? A brute, a savage. That's what everyone says you are. Elijah's mouth twisted. I've been a brute. I've been a savage. The war made me that way. He looked at his hands, hands that had killed men, had dug tiny graves, had been gentle with her boot. But that's not all I am. Just like fat and plain aren't all you are. Before Clara could respond, a shadow fell across their table. Lucille Crane stood there, dressed in black velvet, her face arranged in an expression of honeyed concern. Behind her, Pearl Whitfield and two other society women formed a wall of silk and judgment. Mr. Stone, Mrs. Stone, Lucille's smile didn't reach her eyes. How lovely to see you out in public. I hope you don't mind if we join you for a moment. Elijah didn't stand, didn't offer a chair. I do mind. Lucille's smile flickered. Now there's no need to be hostile. I simply wanted to welcome your wife to Copper Falls society. She turned to Clara, her gaze sweeping over the emerald dress with barely concealed envy. Mrs. Galloway's work, isn't it? She does wonders with difficult figures. The insult landed. Clara felt it like a knife between her ribs. But something had changed. Maybe it was the dress. Maybe it was Elijah's presence. Maybe it was 3 days of being treated like a human being instead of a burden. Mrs. Galloway is very talented, Clara said, her voice steady. She said she's been waiting 20 years for someone to put you in your place. I'm glad I could help. A gasp from Pearl. Lucille's mask cracked. For a split second, pure hatred blazed in her eyes. You have a sharp tongue for someone who was scrubbing floors last week, and you have a pleasant smile for someone with a rotten soul. I suppose we're both full of surprises. Dead silence. Elijah's mouth twitched. Lucille's hands clenched at her sides. She was not accustomed to being challenged. She was accustomed to power, to deference, to fear. You think this is real? Lucille's voice dropped to a hiss only Clara could hear. You think he actually wants you? Look at yourself. Look at him. This is a business arrangement at best, a joke at worst. Clara leaned in close. Maybe it is a business arrangement, but here's the difference between us, Mrs. Crane. He chose me. With all your beauty, all your money, all your scheming, he looked right through you. And that's going to eat you alive for the rest of your life. Lucille went white. For a moment, Clara thought the widow might actually strike her. But they were in public. Witnesses everywhere. Lucille straightened, smoothed her skirt, forced a smile that looked like a wound. We'll see how long this lasts, she said sweetly. We'll see how long before he realizes what he's actually married. She turned and swept away, her entourage following like ducklings. Clara's hands were shaking under the table. Elijah reached over and covered them with his own. Well done, he said quietly. I think I'm going to be sick. That passes. The victory doesn't. He squeezed her hands once, then released them. Eat your dinner. You're going to need your strength. Why? Because tomorrow I'm taking you to meet your mother's new doctor. And after that, we're going to make Lucille Crane regret the day she ever crossed us. They finished dinner in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not awkward, not tense, companionable. When they returned to the suite, Clara expected. She didn't know what she expected. This was their wedding night, after all. Even if the marriage was a business arrangement, there were certain expectations. Elijah solved the problem immediately. I'll take the chair by the fire. The bed is yours. Clara stared at him. You can't sleep in a chair. I've slept on rocks. I've slept in trees. I've slept standing up with a rifle in my hands. A chair is luxury. But, Clara, his voice was firm but not unkind. I told you this was a partnership. I meant it. I won't touch you unless you want to be touched. I won't expect anything you're not willing to give. He pulled a blanket from the closet and settled into the large armchair by the fireplace. Get some sleep. Tomorrow will be harder than today. Clara stood there for a long moment, watching him. This strange, scarred man who had turned her life upside down in 3 days. Elijah? Why me? Really? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Because you didn't see gold when you looked at me, he said finally. You saw a broken boot, and you fixed it without asking for anything in return. He closed his eyes. In my experience, that makes you the rarest person in the world. Clara climbed into the massive bed, pulled the covers up to her chin, and lay there in the darkness, listening to Elijah's breathing, slow, into sleep. She thought about everything that had happened. The store, the mountain, the proposal, the courthouse, Lucille's hatred, her father's disappearance. 3 days ago she had been Clara Jennings, town joke, punching bag, invisible. Now she was Clara Stone, wife of the richest man in Montana, enemy of the most powerful woman in Copper Falls. Everything had changed. But tomorrow, she knew, the real battle would begin. The morning came too fast and too bright. Clara woke to find Elijah already dressed, standing by the window with a cup of coffee in his hand. The chair by the fire had been neatly made up, blanket folded, as if he'd never slept there. "Your mother," he said, without turning around. "We're bringing her here. Today." Clara sat up. "What?" "Dr. Harrison, the real doctor from Helena, arrives this afternoon. I sent for him 3 days ago when I first decided to propose. He specializes in consumption. If anyone can help her, he can." Clara's mind reeled. 3 days ago? But you didn't even know if I'd say yes. "No, but I hoped you would." He finally turned to face her, and I wanted to be ready. Clara felt tears threatening. "My mother, she can't be moved. She's too weak." "I've arranged a wagon with a proper bed, heated bricks for warmth, a nurse to attend her during transport." Elijah set down his coffee. "Everything is ready. We just need to go get her." Clara stared at this man who planned for everything, who moved through the world like a chess master, 3 steps ahead of everyone else. "Why are you doing all this?" "Because I said I would, and I don't break my word." He crossed to the wardrobe and pulled out a heavy coat, one of the new ones Mrs. Galloway had sent up. "Get dressed. We leave in 20 minutes." Clara dressed in a daze. The burgundy wool dress, the fur-lined cloak that cost more than a year of her sewing income, boots that actually fit. She looked in the mirror and still didn't recognize herself. The ride to her old shack took 15 minutes. 15 minutes to travel from the finest hotel in Copper Falls to the rotting hovel where she'd spent 24 years of her life. The contrast was obscene. When the wagon pulled up, Clara's heart clenched. The shack looked even worse than she remembered. The roof sagging, the windows stuffed with rags, smoke barely trickling from the crooked chimney. Her mother was in there, dying. "Wait here," Elijah said. "No, she's my mother. I'm going in." He didn't argue. They climbed down from the wagon together. Elijah nodded to the nurse, a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Porter, who followed with a basket of medical supplies. Clara pushed open the door. The smell hit her first. Sickness, poverty, despair. Ruth Jennings lay on the narrow cot, barely visible under a pile of thin blankets. Her face was pale as wax, her breathing shallow and wet. "Mama?" Ruth's eyes fluttered open, focused, widened. "Clara?" Her voice was a whisper, thin as paper. Is that you?" Clara rushed to her side, knelt beside the cot, took her mother's hand. "It's me, Mama. I'm here." Ruth's eyes moved past Clara to the massive figure in the doorway. Who is that?" Clara took a breath. "That's my husband, Mama. Elijah Stone." Ruth blinked again, clearly convinced she was hallucinating. "Your husband?" "It's a long story, but he's going to help us. He's bringing doctors, medicine. We're taking you somewhere warm." Ruth's eyes filled with tears. "I don't understand. Your father said... He said you'd never... Papa's gone, Mama. He's not coming back." Something shifted in Ruth's face. Relief, maybe, or release. "Good," she whispered. "Good." Mrs. Porter stepped forward, all business. "Mrs. Jennings, I'm going to examine you now. Then we're going to move you to a proper bed in a proper room. Can you do that for me?" Ruth looked at Clara, at Elijah, at the nurse with her clean apron and professional manner. "Am I dreaming?" Clara squeezed her hand. "No, Mama, you're awake, and everything is going to be different now." The move took 2 hours. Elijah organized it like a military operation. Heated bricks in the wagon bed, extra blankets, a smooth route that avoided the worst ruts. Mrs. Porter monitoring Ruth's breathing every 5 minutes. By midday, Ruth Jennings was installed in her own room at the hotel. Warm, clean, with a real bed and real medicine, and a window that looked out over the mountains. She fell asleep almost immediately, the first peaceful sleep she'd had in months. Clara stood by her mother's bed, watching her breathe. "She looks better already," she whispered. "Rest and warmth will help. The doctor will do more." Clara turned to Elijah. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to thank me. This is what we agreed." "No," Clara shook her head. "We agreed on protection, safety. You didn't have to do this. You didn't have to bring her here. You didn't have to hire nurses and doctors and—" "Clara." He stepped closer. His hand rose, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Your mother is your family. That makes her my family now. And I take care of my family." Clara's throat closed up. No one had ever taken care of her. She had always been the one holding things together, mending what was broken, giving everything and receiving nothing. Now this stranger, this husband, was carrying a burden she'd thought she'd carry alone until it killed her. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything. Just let me help." A knock at the door interrupted them. A young man in a hotel uniform stood there, nervous. "Mr. Stone? There's a situation downstairs. Sheriff Polk is here. He says he has a warrant." Elijah's expression didn't change, but Clara felt him go still beside her. "A warrant for what?" "For your arrest, sir, on charges of kidnapping and assault." Clara's blood turned to ice. "That's insane. He didn't kidnap anyone. He married me." "The charges were filed by Mr. Virgil Jennings, ma'am. He claims Mr. Stone took you against your will." Elijah's jaw tightened. "Lucille," he said quietly. "She got to him." "What do we do?" "We go downstairs." He turned to her, his eyes calm but hard. "And we show them that their little scheme isn't going to work." He started for the door. "Elijah!" He stopped. "Be careful, please." For just a moment, something softened in his face. "I've survived worse than a corrupt sheriff and a bitter widow. Stay with your mother. I'll handle this." He walked out. Clara watched him go, her heart pounding, her mind racing. The war had truly begun, and she had a terrible feeling that the first real battle was about to be fought. Clara couldn't stay in that room. She waited exactly 30 seconds after Elijah left, then kissed her mother's forehead and followed him down the stairs. Her heart hammered against her ribs with every step. Whatever was happening in that lobby, she refused to hide from it. She reached the bottom of the staircase and stopped cold. Sheriff Polk stood in the center of the lobby, flanked by 2 deputies with hands on their holsters. Behind them, a small crowd had gathered. Hotel guests, staff, curious townspeople who had followed the commotion inside. And there, standing off to the side with a triumphant smile, was Lucille Crane. Beside her stood Virgil Jennings. Clara's stomach turned to ice. Her father looked different. Cleaned up, shaved, wearing a new coat that someone had clearly bought for him. His hands weren't shaking. His eyes weren't bloodshot. Lucille had sobered him up, dressed him, coached him, turned him into a weapon. "There she is!" Virgil pointed a trembling finger at Clara.
"There's my daughter, the one he stole from me."
Elijah stood between the sheriff and the staircase, his posture relaxed, but his eyes dangerous. "I didn't steal anyone," he said, his voice carrying through the silent lobby. "I married her, legally, in front of Judge Harrison." "Under duress," Virgil shouted. "He threatened her, threatened me, said he'd kill us both if she didn't go along with it." Clara pushed through the crowd. "That's a lie." Every head turned. She walked forward until she stood beside Elijah, her chin high, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. "I married him willingly. No one forced me. No one threatened me." Sheriff Polk's eyes narrowed. He was a thick man with a red face and the look of someone who enjoyed power more than justice. "Ma'am, your father says you were coerced. He says this man took you up to his cabin against your will and—" "My father is a drunk and a liar who beat me for 24 years. Silence crashed through the lobby like a wave. Clara felt the weight of every stare, every judgment. She felt the old shame rising up, the instinct to look down, to apologize, to make herself small. She crushed it. "He hit me the night before I went up that mountain. Right here." She touched her cheek, where the bruise had faded, but the memory remained. "He told me to seduce Mr. Stone, or he'd throw my dying mother into the snow." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I went up that mountain expecting nothing. Mr. Stone offered me kindness. He offered me safety. He offered to save my mother's life." Clara's voice shook, but she didn't stop. "And yes, he offered me marriage. I said yes, not because I was forced, because for the first time in my life, someone saw me as a human being instead of a burden." She turned to her father. "You sold me, Papa. You've been trying to sell me my whole life. The only difference is that this time, I chose the buyer." Virgil's face contorted. "You ungrateful—" "Enough." Sheriff Polk held up a hand. "Ma'am, I appreciate your perspective, but your father has filed official charges. I have a duty to investigate." "Then investigate." Elijah stepped forward, his voice cold. "Talk to Judge Harrison, who performed the ceremony. Talk to the witnesses who signed the certificate. Talk to Mrs. Galloway, who dressed my wife yesterday. Talk to anyone with eyes who saw us walk through this town together." He moved closer to the sheriff, close enough that Polk had to look up to meet his gaze. "But understand something, Sheriff. If you arrest me on these false charges, if you put me in a cell based on the word of a man who sold his own daughter to pay gambling debts, I will remember. And when I get out, I will make it my personal mission to ensure you never wear that badge again." Polk's face went red, then white. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm making a promise. There's a difference." The tension in the lobby stretched to a breaking point. Clara could see the deputies' hands twitching toward their guns. She could see Lucille's smile widening, feeding on the chaos. Then a new voice cut through the silence. "What in God's name is going on here?" Everyone turned. Judge Harrison stood in the hotel doorway, his coat dusted with snow, his face flushed with anger. Behind him stood a tall man in a formal suit, a stranger Clara didn't recognize. "I heard there was some nonsense about kidnapping charges," the judge said, pushing through the crowd. "Against the man I married yesterday? In my own chambers? With witnesses?" Sheriff Polk straightened. "Judge Harrison, Mr. Jennings here claims—" "I don't care what Mr. Jennings claims." The judge's voice cracked like a whip. "I was there. I performed the ceremony. I watched Miss Jennings, Mrs. Stone, say 'I do' of her own free will. There was no coercion, no threats, nothing but a legal marriage between two consenting adults." He turned to Virgil, disgust plain on his face. "You, sir, are a liar. And if you persist in these false accusations, I will have you charged with perjury. Do you understand?" Virgil's newfound courage crumbled. He looked to Lucille for support. Lucille's smile had frozen on her face. This wasn't how the scene was supposed to play out. I must have been mistaken," Virgil stammered. "I was upset. My daughter, married so suddenly. A father worries." "Then worry quietly." Judge Harrison turned to Sheriff Polk. Are we done here? The sheriff's jaw worked. He wanted to push forward. Clara could see it in his eyes. But the judge had cut him off at the knees. For now, Polk said through gritted teeth. But this isn't over, Stone. I'll be watching you. Watch all you want. Elijah's voice was flat. You won't see anything but a man protecting his family. The sheriff and his deputies retreated. The crowd began to disperse, buzzing with whispers. Lucille stood alone for a moment, her face a mask of controlled fury. She caught Clara's eye across the lobby. The look she gave was pure venom. Pure promise. This isn't over. Then she turned and swept out, leaving nothing but the click of her heels and the scent of expensive perfume. Clara's knees went weak. She swayed. Elijah's hand caught her elbow, steadying her. Breathe, he murmured. It's over. For now. For now, Clara repeated. But she'll try again. Yes, she will. Judge Harrison approached them, the stranger in the formal suit following. Mr. Stone, Mrs. Stone, I apologize for that spectacle. I came as soon as I heard what was happening. Thank you, Judge. Elijah shook his hand. Your timing was perfect. It wasn't timing, it was this gentleman. The judge gestured to the stranger. He arrived on the noon stage and came straight to my office.
When he heard about the arrest warrant, he insisted we come immediately. The stranger stepped forward. He was perhaps 50, with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Mr. Stone, I'm Marcus Webb. I believe you sent for me. Clara looked at Elijah, confused. Mr. Webb is a lawyer, Elijah said. From Helena. One of the best in the territory. The best, Webb corrected with a thin smile. I don't do modesty. It wastes time. He turned to Clara, studying her with those sharp eyes. Mrs. Stone, I've heard quite a bit about you in the last hour. It seems you've made some powerful enemies very quickly. I didn't mean to make enemies. I just wanted to survive. In my experience, that's how the best enemies are made. Webb pulled a leather folder from his bag. Now, shall we go somewhere private and discuss how we're going to destroy Lucille Crane? They gathered in Elijah's suite. Elijah, Clara, Judge Harrison, and Marcus Webb. The lawyer spread papers across the desk while the others listened. Lucille Crane is not as powerful as she thinks, Webb began. She has influence, yes, social standing, but her finances are precarious. Her first husband left her comfortable. Her second husband left her wealthy. But she's been spending faster than she's been earning for years. How do you know this? Clara asked. Because I made it my business to know. When Mr. Stone contacted me last week about potential business dealings in Copper Falls, I investigated everyone of importance in this town. Webb smiled thinly. Mrs. Crane's debts are significant. She owes money to banks in Helena, Butte, and Denver. She's been living on credit and reputation. That's why she wanted to marry Elijah, Clara said slowly. His money. Precisely. And now that you've taken that option away from her, she's dangerous. A cornered animal with nothing left to lose. Elijah leaned forward. What about the sheriff and the Branson brothers?
Sheriff Polk is bought and paid for, has been for years. He takes bribes from the Bransons, looks the other way when they collect debts, aggressively. He's also been skimming from the town treasury, though proving that will take time.
The Bransons?
More complicated. They're not just debt collectors. They're connected to larger criminal operations throughout the territory. Cattle rustling, claim jumping, a few suspected murders that were never solved. Webb's expression darkened. They're dangerous, Mr. Stone. Not the kind of enemies you want.
I didn't choose them as enemies. They chose me when they threatened my wife's family.
Nevertheless, we need to be strategic. Webb pulled out a specific document. I've drafted several legal instruments. First, a formal complaint against Virgil Jennings for filing false charges. This puts him on the defensive and makes it harder for Mrs. Crane to use him again.
What about Lucille herself? Patience, Mrs. Stone. We can't attack her directly. Not yet. She's too well connected socially. But we can isolate her, cut off her allies, expose her debts, make her toxic to the very society she depends on. Clara shook her head. This sounds like war. It is war. Mrs. Crane declared it when she tried to have your husband arrested. The only question now is whether you're willing to fight. Clara looked at Elijah. He was watching her, his expression unreadable. What do you think? She asked him. I think we don't have a choice. Lucille won't stop. The sheriff won't stop. If we don't fight back, they'll destroy us. And if we do fight back? We might still lose, but at least we'll go down swinging. Clara thought of her mother upstairs, finally warm, finally safe. She thought of the life she'd been promised. Security, dignity, a chance to be something other than a victim. She thought of Lucille's venomous smile and her father's cowardice and all the years of cruelty that had brought her to this moment. Tell me what to do, she said to Webb. I'll fight. The lawyer smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. Good, because the first battle begins tomorrow night. What's tomorrow night? The Founders' Day Ball, the biggest social event of the year. Everyone who matters in Copper Falls will be there. Webb leaned back in his chair. Including you, Mrs. Stone, on your husband's arm, in the finest dress money can buy, showing this town exactly who they're dealing with. Clara's stomach dropped. A ball? I don't know how to. You'll learn. Webb's voice was firm. Mrs. Crane expects you to hide. She expects you to cower. She's counting on your shame and your fear to keep you invisible while she poisons this town against you. He stood, gathering his papers. The best way to defeat her is to refuse to be invisible. Show up, stand tall. Let them see that you're not ashamed of who you are or who you married. And if they laugh at me? Then let them laugh. And while they're laughing, we'll be gathering the evidence we need to bring them all down. After Webb and the judge left, Clara stood by the window, watching the snow fall over Copper Falls. Elijah came up behind her. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. The ball, Webb's strategy, any of it. If you want to leave, go back to the mountain, forget all these people. I'll take you tonight. Clara didn't turn around. Is that what you want? To run? I want whatever keeps you safe. And what about you? What do you want for yourself? Silence. I stopped wanting things for myself a long time ago, Elijah said finally. After Sarah. After Emma. Want felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. Clara turned to face him. And now? He was quiet for a long moment. His eyes searched her face like he was looking for something he'd lost. Now I want things I have no right to want. Clara's breath caught. What things? He reached out. His rough hand cupped her cheek, so gentle it made her eyes sting. Peace, he said softly. A home that feels like a home. Someone who looks at me and sees something other than gold or grief. I see you, Clara whispered. I've always seen you. I know. That's why I married you. They stood there, inches apart, the snow falling outside and the fire crackling inside. Clara felt something shifting between them, something that had nothing to do with business arrangements or legal strategies. Something real. Elijah leaned forward. His forehead touched hers. Whatever happens tomorrow, he murmured. Whatever happens at that ball, you're not alone anymore. Do you understand?
Yes.
Good. He pulled back slightly, his eyes holding hers. Now get some rest. Tomorrow, we go to war. Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in the massive bed, staring at the ceiling, while Elijah kept his vigil in the chair by the fire. Her mind wouldn't stop racing. The ball, Lucille, the Bransons, her mother. The way Elijah had touched her cheek like she was something precious. Elijah? Are you awake? Always. Clara sat up. Can I ask you something? Yes. When you married me, was it only about business? Only about keeping the vultures away? Silence stretched between them. At first, he admitted, that's what I told myself. That it was practical, logical. That I needed someone trustworthy and you needed protection, and it made sense. And now? He turned his head to look at her. In the firelight, his scarred face looked almost soft. Now I'm not sure it was ever just about business. I think I knew, even in that store, that you were different. That you saw things other people missed. That you were worth 10 of every silk-dressed woman in that town. You couldn't have known that. We'd barely spoken. I knew, his voice was certain. The same way I knew Sarah was different the first time I saw her. The same way I knew Emma would have my mother's eyes before she was even born. Some things you just know. Clara felt tears threatening. I'm not Sarah. No, you're not. And I'm not asking you to be. He sat up in the chair, his eyes intense. Sarah was my past, my first love, my greatest grief. But she's gone, and I've spent 7 years trying to follow her into the dark. He stood, crossed to the bed, sat on the edge, close enough that Clara could feel the heat of him. You pulled me back, he said quietly. That day in the store, when you knelt in the mud and fixed my boot without asking for anything. You pulled me back into the world of the living. I just fixed a boot. You fixed more than that. He took her hand, turned it over, traced the calluses on her palm. I'm not good at this, he said. Words, feelings. I've been alone too long, but I want you to know something. What? This isn't just business anymore. Not for me. And whatever you feel, or don't feel, I'll wait. As long as it takes. Clara looked at this man, this scarred, grieving, impossibly gentle man who had turned her life upside down. You might not have to wait very long, she whispered. His eyes met hers. Something sparked between them, something that had been building since that first moment in the store. Clara, don't talk. She reached up and touched his face, tracing the scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. Just stay, please. He didn't move to the chair. He stayed. And when Clara finally fell asleep, it was with his arms around her and his heartbeat steady against her back. For the first time in 24 years, she felt safe. Tomorrow, the war would begin. But tonight, she had peace. Clara woke to the sound of her own heartbeat. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The bed was too soft, the room was too warm, and there was an arm around her waist, heavy, protective, real. Elijah. She lay still, barely breathing, feeling the rise and fall of his chest against her back. He was still asleep. His breath was slow and even, his body relaxed in a way she'd never seen when he was awake. Last night felt like a dream. The way he'd looked at her, the way he'd touched her face, the way he'd said, "This isn't just business anymore," like it cost him something to admit. Clara closed her eyes and let herself have this moment. Just this one moment of peace before the storm. Then she remembered. The ball. Tonight. Every important person in Copper Falls watching her, judging her, waiting for her to fail. Her stomach clenched. Behind her, Elijah stirred. "You're thinking too loud." His voice was rough with sleep, his breath warm against her hair. "Sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just tell me what's wrong." Clara turned in his arms to face him. In the gray morning light, he looked younger somehow, less guarded. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of what?" "Tonight, the ball, all those people." She swallowed. "What if I make a fool of myself? What if I embarrass you?"
Elijah's brow furrowed. "You could never embarrass me."
"You don't know that. I don't know how to dance. I don't know how to make small talk with society people. I don't know which fork to use or how to curtsy or—"
"Clara." He said her name like a command. She stopped. "Listen to me." He propped himself up on one elbow, his gray eyes serious. "Those people in that ballroom, they're not better than you. They're just richer. And half of them got rich by cheating, stealing, or marrying well."
"That doesn't make me less terrified."
"Good. Use it." He sat up fully, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. "Fear keeps you sharp. Fear keeps you alive. The trick isn't getting rid of fear. It's walking forward anyway." He stood and crossed to the window, looking out at the town below. "When I was in the war, there was a battle at Cold Harbor. We knew we were walking into a slaughter. Men wrote their names on pieces of paper and pinned them to their coats so their bodies could be identified." Clara's heart constricted.
"What did you do?"
"I walked forward anyway." He turned to face her. "And I survived. Not because I wasn't afraid, because I refused to let fear make my decisions for me." He crossed back to the bed and took her hands. "Tonight, you walk into that ballroom like you own it. Not because you're not scared, because you're scared and you're doing it anyway. That's courage, Clara. Real courage." Clara looked at their joined hands. His were rough, scarred, twice the size of hers.
"Will you be with me? The whole time?"
"Every second."
"Promise?"
"I promise." She took a deep breath, let it out slowly.
"Okay. Let's do this."
The day passed in a blur of preparation. Mrs. Galloway arrived at noon with a dress that made Clara's breath catch. Midnight blue silk with silver embroidery, cut to flatter rather than hide. Elegant without being ostentatious. "I stayed up all night finishing it," the dressmaker said, helping Clara into the corset. "Lucille Crane ordered a red gown for tonight. She wants to be seen."
"And me?"
"You don't need to be seen, Mrs. Stone. You need to be remembered." The transformation took hours. Hair pinned and curled, a touch of color on her lips, the ruby ring gleaming on her finger, pearl earrings that Elijah had produced from somewhere with a gruff, "They were my mother's." When Clara finally looked in the mirror, she didn't recognize herself. The woman staring back wasn't beautiful. She would never be beautiful in the way Lucille was beautiful. But there was something else there, something solid and real and undeniable. Presence. For the first time in her life, Clara Jennings looked like someone who mattered. No, not Clara Jennings. Clara Stone. A knock at the door. Mrs. Galloway opened it, and Elijah stepped inside. He stopped dead. For a long moment, he just stared. Clara felt heat rising to her cheeks. "It's too much," she said quickly. "I told Mrs. Galloway it was too much, but she insisted, 'Be quiet.'" He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopped in front of her. His eyes moved over the dress, the hair, the woman underneath. "You're magnificent," he said quietly. Clara's throat closed up. "You don't have to say that." "I don't say things I don't mean." He offered his arm. "Are you ready?" Clara took his arm. "No." "Good. Let's go anyway."
The Founders' Day Ball was held in the town hall, the largest building in Copper Falls, decorated with enough candles and bunting to be seen from the mountain. When Elijah and Clara arrived, the street was already crowded with carriages. The sound of music and laughter spilled out into the cold night air. Clara's grip on Elijah's arm tightened. "Breathe," he murmured. "Remember what I said. Walk forward anyway." They climbed the steps together. The doorman's eyes widened when he saw them. He fumbled for the guest list. "Mr. and Mrs. Stone, you're on the list. Please, go right in." The doors opened. The ballroom fell silent. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. 100 pairs of eyes fixed on the couple in the doorway, the mountain man in his dark suit and the heavy woman in midnight blue silk. Clara felt the weight of their stares like a physical force. She felt the judgment, the curiosity, the disbelief. She wanted to run. Elijah's hand covered hers on his arm. Warm, steady, present. "Walk," he murmured. She walked. They descended the 3 steps into the ballroom together, moving through the crowd like a ship through water. People parted before them, whispers trailing in their wake. "Is that really her? Plain Clara? Look at that dress. Look at that ring. He actually brought her." Clara kept her eyes forward, her chin up, her spine straight. Walk forward anyway. They reached the center of the room just as the orchestra struck up a waltz. Elijah turned to face her. "Dance with me." Clara's heart stopped. "I told you, I don't know how." "I know. I'll lead. Just follow." He took her hand in his, placed his other hand on her waist, drew her close enough that she could feel his heartbeat. "Look at me," he said quietly. "Only at me. No one else exists." Clara looked into his gray eyes, and somehow the ballroom faded. The whispers disappeared. There was only this man, this moment, this music. They began to move. She stumbled at first, stepped on his feet, felt the old shame rising up. "Sorry, I'm sorry." "Stop apologizing. Everyone stumbles. The trick is to keep moving." He guided her through the steps, patient and steady, his body leading hers in a way that felt almost natural. And slowly, something shifted. The movements became easier. The rhythm started to make sense. Clara realized she was dancing, actually dancing, in front of everyone who had ever called her worthless. The waltz ended. The ballroom erupted in applause, scattered at first, then building. Clara looked around, startled. People were clapping. For her. "You did it," Elijah murmured. "We did it." "No, that was all you." Before Clara could respond, a voice cut through the moment. "How touching." They turned. Lucille Crane stood before them, resplendent in blood-red silk, her smile sharp as a blade. Behind her, Pearl Whitfield and a cluster of society women formed a wall of judgment. "Mr. Stone, Mrs. Stone." Lucille's eyes swept over Clara's dress with barely concealed envy. "What a delightful surprise. I wasn't sure you'd have the courage to attend." "Why wouldn't I?" Clara asked, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Well, after that embarrassing scene at the hotel yesterday, the false kidnapping charges, your father's drunken accusations." Lucille shook her head with mock sympathy. "I thought you might prefer to hide. Less humiliating that way." "The only thing humiliating about yesterday was watching you manipulate a desperate drunk to do your dirty work." Gasps rippled through the nearby crowd. People stopped pretending not to listen. Lucille's smile didn't waver. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean." "I'm sure you do." Clara stepped forward, surprising herself with her own boldness. "You paid my father to file those charges. You coached him on what to say. You thought you could have my husband arrested on lies and rumors." That's quite an accusation. It's quite a crime. Clara held her gaze. And it failed, just like every other scheme you've tried. Lucille's composure cracked. Just for a second, a flash of rage behind those calculating eyes. You have no idea who you're dealing with, girl. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A woman so desperate for money that she'd burn down anyone who gets between her and a rich husband. Clara smiled, a real smile, not a polite one. But here's the thing, Mrs. Crane. He chose me, and there's nothing you can do to change that. The crowd had grown silent. Everyone was watching now. The entire ballroom had become a stage. Lucille stepped closer, dropping her voice to a vicious whisper. You think you've won? You think putting on a pretty dress makes you one of us? You're trash, Clara. You've always been trash. And when this farce of a marriage falls apart, and it will, you'll be back where you belong, scrubbing floors and begging for scraps. Clara felt the words land like blows. The old wounds opened. The old shame surged up. But then she felt Elijah's presence behind her. Solid, steady, real. And she remembered what he'd said. Walk forward anyway. Maybe you're right, Clara said quietly. Maybe I am trash. Maybe this is all a dream and I'll wake up tomorrow in that shack, watching my mother die while my father drinks away our last pennies. She stepped even closer to Lucille, so close she could smell the widow's expensive perfume. But here's what I know for certain. Right now, in this moment, I'm wearing a ring worth more than your entire house. I'm married to a man who looks at me like I matter. And you, the great Lucille Crane, are standing here, alone, trying to tear me down because you can't stand that a fat seamstress took something you wanted. Clara pulled back, her voice rising so the whole crowd could hear. So call me trash. Call me whatever you want. It won't change the fact that I'm Mrs. Elijah Stone, and you're just a bitter widow with an empty bed and a mountain of debt. Dead silence. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, someone started to clap. Then another. Then another. The applause spread through the ballroom like wildfire. Not everyone joined. Some of Lucille's allies stood frozen, horrified. But enough. Enough to make it clear whose side the room was on. Lucille's face went white. For a moment, Clara thought the widow might actually attack her. Her hands were clenched at her sides, her whole body trembling with rage. Then Lucille turned and swept through the crowd, her red dress trailing behind her like a wound. Pearl and the other society women scattered in her wake, fleeing the wreckage. Clara's knees went weak. Elijah's hand found the small of her back. Time to go, he murmured. But we've made our point. Now we leave before she regroups. They made their way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and handshakes from people Clara didn't recognize. The mayor, a banker, a mining magnate who pumped Elijah's hand and declared him a man of excellent taste. They were almost to the door when a voice stopped them. Mr. Stone. They turned. A man stood in their path. Tall, handsome, with the kind of smile that promised trouble. Clara didn't recognize him, but she saw Elijah stiffen. Jack Harlan, Elijah said flatly. You remember me. The man's smile widened. I'm flattered. Hard to forget someone who cheats at cards. Alleged cheating, never proven. Jack's eyes slid to Clara, moving over her in a way that made her skin crawl. And this must be the famous Mrs. Stone. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone smaller. He laughed at his own joke. But I see now why Silas chose you. There's fire in you. I like fire. Elijah stepped between them.
Walk away, Harlan. Easy, mountain man. I'm just being friendly. But there was something in Jack's eyes, something cold and calculating. Mrs. Crane asked me to deliver a message. I don't want any messages from Mrs. Crane. You'll want this one. Jack leaned in close, his voice dropping. She says the real game hasn't started yet. She says you should enjoy your little victory tonight, because tomorrow the Branson brothers come to collect. Clara's blood turned to ice. The Bransons? But my father's debt was paid. Oh, this isn't about your father's debt, sweetheart. Jack's smile turned vicious. This is about Elijah's mine. The Bransons have a claim on that land, or at least they will by morning. Mrs. Crane has been very busy with paperwork. He stepped back, spreading his hands. Consider this a courtesy. Professional gambler to professional whatever you are. He tipped his hat. Enjoy the rest of your evening. It might be your last peaceful one. He melted into the crowd. Clara looked at Elijah. His face had gone hard as granite. Is it true? Can they take your mine? They can try. His jaw tightened. Let's go. We need to talk to Webb. They left the ballroom without another word. Behind them, the music played on. But Clara could feel it, the brief moment of triumph slipping away. The real battle was just beginning. They found Marcus Webb in his hotel room, surrounded by documents. He looked up when they entered, took one look at their faces, and set down his pen. What happened? Elijah told him about Jack Harlan, about Lucille's message, about the Bransons and the claim on the mine. Webb listened without interrupting. When Elijah finished, the lawyer was quiet for a long moment. She's been planning this longer than I thought, he said finally. The kidnapping charges, the ball, the confrontation, it was all distraction. While we were focused on social games, she was working on the legal angle. Can she do it? Can she actually take my land? Theoretically, the mining claims in this territory are a mess. Half of them weren't filed properly. If she can prove there's an irregularity in your original claim, a missed payment, a technicality, anything, she could challenge it in court. And if she wins? If she wins, the Bransons get your mine, and Lucille gets whatever they promised her for setting it up. Clara felt sick. But that's his mine. He's worked it for years. He found the copper himself. The law doesn't care about fairness, Mrs. Stone. It cares about paperwork. Webb stood, grabbing his coat. I need to see the original claim documents. Tonight. Where are they? At the cabin, on the mountain. Then we go to the mountain. They rode through the night, the three of them, Elijah, Clara, and Webb, on horses pushing through the snow. The moon was bright enough to light the path, but the cold was brutal. Clara's fingers went numb inside her gloves. Her face burned from the wind. She didn't complain. This was too important. They reached the cabin just before dawn. Elijah went straight to a locked chest in the corner. He pulled out a metal box, rusted with age, and handed it to Webb. The lawyer spread the documents on the table, reading by lantern light. His expression grew grimmer with each page. Well? Elijah demanded after 20 minutes. The claim is solid. Your paperwork is in order. There's no technical grounds for challenge. Then we're safe? Not exactly. Webb looked up. The Bransons don't need legal grounds. They just need to file a challenge. That ties up the claim in court for months, maybe years. During that time, you can't sell the copper. You can't take on investors. You can't expand. So they bleed me dry with legal fees. Exactly. And if you can't pay, you default. The claim goes to auction. They buy it for pennies on the dollar.
Clara's hands clenched. There has to be something we can do. Webb was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at Elijah. There is one option, but you won't like it. Tell me.
The Bransons operate because no one stands up to them. They threaten, they intimidate, and people back down. But they've made enemies over the years, a lot of enemies. Miners they cheated, families they destroyed. If we could find those people, organize them, present a united front, a war, Elijah said flatly. A legal war, depositions, testimonies, evidence of their crimes. Webb leaned forward. Lucille thinks she's playing chess. She doesn't realize she's opened herself up to the same tactics. Her debts, her bribes, her connection to the Bransons' criminal operations. If we can prove it, we destroy her. We destroy all of them. Silence filled the cabin. Clara looked at Elijah. He was staring at the documents, his jaw tight, his eyes distant. How long? He asked. Weeks, maybe months. We'd need to find witnesses, gather evidence, build a case that can't be dismissed. And until then? Until then, we hold the line. We don't let them intimidate us. We don't back down. Elijah looked at Clara. This affects you too. If we do this, they'll come after both of us. It won't be safe. Clara thought of the ballroom, of Lucille's venom, of all the years she'd spent being afraid. She was tired of being afraid. I already told you, she said. I'm ready to fight. Elijah's expression softened. He reached out and took her hand. Then we fight, together. Webb nodded, already gathering the documents. I'll start making inquiries tomorrow. The Bransons have a lot of victims. Someone will talk. And if they don't? Then we make them an offer they can't refuse. The lawyer smiled grimly. Everyone talks eventually. It's just a matter of finding the right price. They left the cabin as the sun rose over the mountains. Clara looked back at the small structure, the place where everything had changed. Just days ago, she had been plain Clara, fixing boots in silence, invisible to everyone who mattered. Now she was Mrs. Elijah Stone, going to war against the most powerful people in the territory. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in 24 years. Hope. They rode down the mountain together, the three of them, as dawn painted the peaks in gold and rose. Behind them, the cabin stood empty. Ahead of them, Copper Falls waited. And somewhere in that town, Lucille Crane was sharpening her knives. The Branson brothers came 3 days later. Clara was sitting with her mother when she heard the commotion downstairs. Shouting, glass breaking. Then Elijah's voice, cold and hard as mountain granite. Stay here, Clara told Ruth, squeezing her hand. Don't open the door for anyone. She ran down the stairs, her heart pounding. The hotel lobby was in chaos. Tables overturned, a window shattered, and in the center of it all stood Elijah, facing down 3 men who looked like they'd been carved from nightmares. The Branson brothers. Clara had heard stories, but the reality was worse. The oldest, Silas Branson, was a massive man with a scarred face and dead eyes. His brothers flanked him, one tall and thin like a blade, the other squat and muscular, with fists like hammers. Behind them stood Sheriff Polk, and behind him, watching from the doorway with a satisfied smile, was Lucille Crane. Mr. Stone. Silas Branson's voice was surprisingly soft, almost pleasant. We've come to discuss your mine. There's nothing to discuss. I disagree. Silas pulled a document from his coat. This is a formal challenge to your claim. Filed this morning with the territorial court. You have 30 days to respond. I'll respond right now. Get out of my hotel. Your hotel? Silas laughed. Bold words for a man who's about to lose everything. He stepped closer to Elijah. They were nearly the same height, but where Elijah was solid and still, Silas radiated violence. "Here's how this works, Mountain Man. You sign over the mine to us, voluntarily. In exchange, we let you keep this hotel. We let your pretty wife keep her fingers. And we let your sick mother-in-law die peacefully in her bed instead of in a ditch." Clara's blood ran cold. "You don't get to threaten my family," Elijah said quietly. "I don't make threats. I make promises." Silas smiled, revealing yellow teeth. "You have until sundown tomorrow. Sign the papers, or we start taking things. Starting with her." He pointed at Clara. Something in Elijah's expression changed. Something dangerous. "Touch her," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "and I'll kill you. All three of you. And anyone else who gets in my way." Silas laughed again. "Big talk. But you're one man. We're three. Plus the sheriff." He glanced at Polk, who nodded smugly. "The law is on our side, Stone. What do you have?" "He has me." Everyone turned. Marcus Webb stood in the doorway, flanked by two men in formal suits. One of them wore a silver star on his chest, a U.S. Marshal. "Silas Branson," the marshal's voice carried through the lobby. "You're under arrest for extortion, assault, and conspiracy to commit murder." Silas's smile vanished. "On what evidence?" "On the testimony of 14 witnesses who you've terrorized over the past decade. On financial records showing bribes paid to Sheriff Polk. On a signed confession from your former associate, Jack Harlan, who decided that prison was preferable to being your partner." Webb stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Mrs. Crane was very helpful in providing documentation. Apparently she kept records of every payment, every threat, every crime, as insurance, I suppose. Insurance that Mr. Harlan was happy to deliver once we offered him immunity." Lucille's face went white. "That's a lie. Jack would never." "Jack already did." Webb pulled out another document. "He also provided a detailed account of your involvement, Miss Crane. The kidnapping charges you orchestrated, the bribery of town officials, the conspiracy to defraud Mr. Stone of his legal property." The marshal nodded to his deputy. "Lucille Crane, you're under arrest." "No!" Lucille backed away, her composure finally shattering. "You can't do this. I'm a respectable woman. You're a criminal." Clara stepped forward, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "And you're done hurting people." Lucille's eyes fixed on Clara with pure hatred. "You did this. You worthless, fat—" "That's enough." Elijah moved between them. "You've lost, Lucille. Accept it." The deputies moved in. Handcuffs clicked around Lucille's wrists, around the Branson brothers' wrists, around Sheriff Polk's wrists. As they were let out, Silas Branson turned back. "This isn't over, Stone. I have friends. Powerful friends." "So do I." Elijah's voice was ice. "The difference is, mine are the right kind of powerful." The door closed behind them. Silence. Then Clara's knees buckled. Elijah caught her before she hit the ground. "It's okay," he murmured, holding her tight. "It's over. It's really over." Clara buried her face in his chest and cried. The trials took 3 weeks. Clara sat in the courtroom every day, watching as witness after witness came forward. Minors who had been cheated, widows whose husbands had died under suspicious circumstances, families who had lost everything to the Branson's schemes. The evidence was overwhelming. Silas Branson and his brothers were sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Sheriff Polk got 15. Lucille Crane, because of her cooperation with the prosecutors, got only 5. But she was also stripped of everything: her house,
her money, her precious reputation. When the final verdict was read, Lucille looked at Clara across the courtroom. There was no hatred left in her eyes, just emptiness. Clara almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Afterward, outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Elijah and Clara. Word of the trials had spread across the territory. The mountain man and the seamstress who brought down a criminal empire. "Mr. Stone! Mrs. Stone! How does it feel to have won?" Elijah said nothing. He hated crowds, hated attention. But Clara stepped forward. "It doesn't feel like winning," she said quietly. "It feels like justice. Finally." "Mrs. Stone, some people are calling you a hero. What do you say to that?" Clara thought about the question. "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who refused to be invisible anymore. Someone who found a partner who believed in me when no one else did." She looked at Elijah. "That's not heroism. That's hope." She took his hand. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we're going home." They walked through the crowd together, hand in hand, toward the wagon that would take them up the mountain. Spring came to the territory. The snow melted from the peaks. Wildflowers bloomed in the meadows. The creek behind Elijah's cabin ran clear and cold. Clara stood on the porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains. Behind her, she could hear Elijah making coffee. Her mother's laughter drifted from the new room they'd built onto the cabin. She was stronger now, the treatments from the Helena doctor finally working. 3 months since the trials. 3 months of peace. Clara still couldn't quite believe it was real. The door opened. Elijah came out with 2 cups, steam rising in the cool morning air. He handed her one and stood beside her, looking out of the same view. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking about the store." "The store?" "Miller's General Store, the day we met." Clara smiled, remembering. "I was so scared that day. Scared of you. Scared of everything. All I wanted was to fix your boot and disappear. And now? Now I never want to disappear again." Elijah was quiet for a moment. Then he set down his coffee and turned to face her. "Clara, there's something I need to say." Her heart skipped. "What is it?" "When I proposed to you on the mountain, I told you it was business, a partnership, protection in exchange for trust." "I remember." "I lied." His gray eyes held hers. "I mean, it was true at the time, or at least I told myself it was true. But the truth is, I knew even then that it was more than that." "Elijah." "Let me finish." He took her hands in his. "I've been alone for 7 years. I convinced myself I didn't need anyone, that I was better off isolated, that love was something that happened once and then it was gone forever." His voice roughened. "Then you knelt in the mud and fixed my boot without asking for anything. And something cracked open inside me. Something I thought was dead." Clara felt tears threatening. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you." The words came out like they cost him everything. "Not because you're useful, not because you're practical, because you're you. Because you see me. Because when I'm with you, I don't feel like a ghost anymore." The tears spilled over. Clara didn't try to stop them. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have since the mountain. Maybe since the store." Elijah pulled her close, held her tight. "I know I'm not easy," he murmured against her hair. "I know I'm scarred and difficult, and I don't talk enough, and I talk too much, and—" "Elijah." "What?" "Shut up and kiss me." He kissed her. And in that moment, on that porch, with the sun rising over the mountains and the whole world stretched out before them. Clara felt something she had never felt in 24 years of being invisible. She felt home. 6 months later, the town of Copper Falls had changed. A new sheriff, a fair one this time. New businesses opening, new families moving in. The shadow of the Bransons was gone, and the town was finally breathing. Clara walked down Main Street, heading to the general store. She was different, too. Not thinner, not more beautiful, but different. She walked with her head up. She met people's eyes. She smiled. People smiled back. "Mrs. Stone!" the baker waved from his shop. "Morning, Mr. Patterson." "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "It really is." She continued down the street, past the hotel that Elijah had rebuilt after the confrontation, past the courthouse, where justice had finally been served, past the spot where she had knelt in the mud and fixed a stranger's boot. So much had changed. So much was the same. She pushed open the door to Miller's General Store. The bell jangled, the same bell as before. Mr. Miller looked up from behind the counter. "Mrs. Stone, what can I get for you today?" "Just some thread, please, and a new needle." "Of course." He reached for the supplies, then hesitated. "Mrs. Stone, I never apologized." "Apologized for what?" "For how I treated you, before. When you were—" He trailed off, uncomfortable. "When I was plain Clara?" "Yes. I was unkind. I let others be unkind. And I'm sorry." Clara studied him. She could hold a grudge. She would be justified in holding a grudge. But she thought of Elijah, of her mother, of the life she had built from the ashes of the old one. "Thank you, Mr. Miller. That means a lot." She paid for her supplies and left. Outside, the sun was warm on her face. She closed her eyes for a moment, just feeling it. "Clara!" She turned. Elijah was walking toward her, his long strides eating up the distance. Even now, after all these months, the sight of him made her heart skip. "What are you doing in town?" she asked. "Looking for you." He stopped in front of her, slightly breathless. "I have news." "What news?" His face broke into a rare, genuine smile. "The doctor confirmed it this morning. Your mother's consumption is gone. Completely gone. She's going to be okay." Clara's hand flew to her mouth. "What? Are you sure?" "Positive. He said it's one of the best recoveries he's ever seen." The tears came again, happy tears this time. Elijah pulled her into his arms, right there in the middle of Main Street. People stared. Clara didn't care. "She's going to be okay," she whispered. "She's going to be okay." They held each other for a long moment. Then Elijah pulled back, his expression suddenly serious. "There's something else." "What?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Clara's breath caught. "Elijah, we're already married." "I know, but I never proposed properly." He opened the box, revealing a ring, not the ruby this time, but a simple gold band with a small diamond. "I never got on my knee. I never asked you to choose me. I just offered a business deal." He dropped to one knee, right there in the middle of the street. "Clara Ruth Stone, will you marry me? Not for business, not for protection, but because I love you more than I ever thought I could love anyone again?" Clara looked at this man, this scarred, difficult, impossibly good man, who had pulled her out of the shadows and into the light. "Yes," she said, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, next to the ruby. Then he stood, lifted her off her feet, and kissed her, while the whole town watched. Someone started to clap, then someone else. Then the whole street was applauding. Clara laughed against Elijah's lips. "People are staring." "Let them stare." "They'll talk." "Let them talk." He set her down, his eyes bright with something that might have been tears. "I spent 7 years hiding from the world. I'm done hiding." Clara looked around at the town that had once mocked her, at the people who had once looked through her like she was invisible. They weren't looking through her now. They were looking at her. And she was finally ready to be seen. 1 year later, Clara sat on the porch of the cabin, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson. In her arms, a baby slept, a little girl with her father's gray eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. Emma, named for the daughter Elijah had lost, named for hope, named for second chances. The door opened. Elijah came out, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He set them down and settled into the chair beside her, his eyes on their daughter. "She looks like you," he said quietly. "She has your eyes." "Poor thing," Clara smiled. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the colors change as the sun sank below the peaks. From inside the cabin, they could hear Ruth laughing at something Mrs. Galloway had said. The dressmaker had become a regular visitor and a friend. "Elijah? Do you ever think about how different things could have been if I hadn't fixed your boot that day?" He was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes. But then I remember what you said once, about stitching." "What did I say?" "You said your mother taught you that the inside stitching matters more than the outside. That if it's ugly underneath, the whole thing falls apart when it's tested." He turned to look at her. "This past year has tested us. The trials, the threats, the baby, everything. And we didn't fall apart." "No, we didn't." "That's because the stitching was good from the beginning." He reached over and took her hand. "It was good because you made it good. Because you fixed things, Clara. Boots, families, men who thought they were beyond repair." Clara felt tears prickling at her eyes. "You fixed me too," she whispered. "You saw me when no one else did." "No," Elijah shook his head. "I just looked where everyone else refused to look. You were always there. You were always worth seeing." The baby stirred, made a small sound, settled again. Clara looked at her daughter, at her husband, at the cabin that had become a home, at the mountains that had witnessed her transformation from invisible to undeniable. She thought of all the people who had called her worthless, useless, plain, fat. She thought of Lucille, rotting in prison. She thought of her father, vanished into the wilderness, never to be seen again. She thought of the girl who had knelt in the mud, fixing a stranger's boot, expecting nothing in return. That girl was gone now. In her place was a woman, a wife, a mother, a survivor. Clara Stone. "I'm happy," she said softly. It felt strange to say out loud. She had never said those words before, not once in her entire life. Elijah squeezed her hand. "So am I." The sun dipped below the horizon. Stars began to emerge, one by one, scattered across the darkening sky like diamonds on velvet. Clara leaned her head against her husband's shoulder, their daughter warm and safe between them. She had spent 24 years being invisible. 24 years waiting for someone to see her. 24 years believing she was worthless. And then a stranger had walked into a store with a broken boot. And everything had changed. Not because he saved her, because he showed her she was worth saving. The rest she had done herself. That was the truth Clara finally understood, sitting on that porch, watching the stars appear. No one else could make you visible. You had to step into the light yourself. And once you did, once you refused to hide, once you stood up and demanded to be seen, the whole world had no choice but to look. Clara Stone had stepped into the light, and she would never go back to the shadows again. Not ever. Not for anyone. She was home. She was loved. She was finally, completely, exactly where she belonged.